Can you imagine grieving your father at his funeral, only to be publicly humiliated by the very woman who replaced your mother? That's how it began for me. I'm Allison Taylor, and my father's death wasn't the end of our family's story. It was just the beginning of the unraveling. But what shook me most wasn't the betrayal. It was the moment my stepsister pulled me aside in front of mourners, her voice shaking like mine used to when we were kids. And what she said next. That was the first crack in everything I thought I knew. If you've ever questioned your place in your own family, this story is for you. I was standing next to a man I didn't recognize, nodding as he told me what a great man my father had been. My feet ached in heels I hadn't worn since last Christmas, and the damp Charleston air clung to my skin like guilt. Funny how grief makes everything feel both sharp and far away. I'd flown in the night before, straight from my modest apartment in Atlanta. I teach music at a small charter school, nothing glamorous, but it pays the rent and lets me live quietly. My life isn't extravagant, but it's mine. Or it was until the call came. He's gone, Allie, heart attack, it was quick. I hadn't heard my stepmother's voice in almost 3 years, and still it had the same effect, tightness in my chest, the automatic bracing like you do when you know a wave's about to hit. Now here I was, black dress, forced smiles, wishing I could grieve in peace. The chapel behind me hummed with low murmurs. A few relatives clutched tissues theatrically, but most were there for the performance of mourning, not the substance. My father, David Taylor, had been a respected contractor in Charleston, known for building homes and breaking promises, at least to me. As I turned to head back inside, I heard the click of heels against the stone. "Allison, wait!" The voice stopped me in my tracks. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Kendra, my stepsister. The last time we spoke, she was still finishing her art degree at a university I couldn't afford. We'd never been close, not really. Growing up, she was the golden girl. Pretty, smart, always just a little too aware that my father favored her, even when he tried to hide it. I tried not to hate her for it. "What do you want, Kendra?" I asked without turning. She stepped in front of me anyway, her dark eyes searching mine with a look that unsettled me more than her presence. "We need to talk," she said urgently. "Now." "Not here," I replied, glancing back toward the open chapel doors. "Not like this." "It can't wait," she snapped, her voice tight. "You think you know what's going on, but you don't." My jaw clenched. I was really trying to be composed, civil, but I was seconds from crumbling. The last thing I needed was a confrontation in full view of half of Charleston society. I stepped back. "Whatever you have to say can wait until after the service." Her face hardened. "You always did run away from uncomfortable truths." Something inside me snapped. "At least I show up," I hissed. "Where were you the last 2 years when he stopped calling me? When he forgot my birthday? Or did your mother make sure you never noticed?" The air between us pulsed with heat, even as the late autumn chills settled over the graveyard. We were standing just feet from his fresh grave, and I hated how the soil still smelled raw. People were watching us now, heads turning, whispers starting. "I'm trying to help you," Kendra said through gritted teeth. "Well, stop," I bit out. "I don't need your charity." She blinked like I'd slapped her. For a second, neither of us spoke. And then, with a sharp exhale, she turned on her heel and stormed off down the gravel path, her heels cracking like a gavel. I stood frozen, my face flushed, unsure who I was angrier at, her or myself. Behind me, the soft drone of the eulogy had resumed, as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something neither of us could take back. As I sat back in the chapel beside a second cousin I barely remembered, I felt the stares on my back. My stepmother, Bernice, turned her head just enough to glance at me over her shoulder, lips pursed, eyes gleaming. The kind of look that said, "Game on." If you've ever been to a Southern funeral reception, you know the routine. White linen tables, bowls of deviled eggs no one touches, and that stiff politeness that feels more like performance than comfort. 2 hours after the service, I stood near the dessert table, pretending to care about a crumbling slice of lemon chess pie, while the chandelier above me glared down like an interrogation lamp. "Still allergic to sweet tea," came a voice like sugar dipped in vinegar. I turned. Bernice. My father's second wife, my stepmother of nearly 20 years. She wore pearl earrings the size of marbles and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She didn't look like a grieving widow. She looked like someone waiting for the second act of her life to begin. Her hand was resting on my arm before I could step back. "Allison, dear, let's speak privately." My stomach dropped. There it was, that fake tenderness she used like a hook. and before I could respond, she was already steering me toward the side hallway of the reception hall, away from the noise, away from the safety of polite conversation. She closed the door behind us. The hallway was narrow, lined with old portraits and a grandfather clock that ticked like a slow accusation. "I assume you're wondering about the will," she said lightly. I didn't answer. I hadn't even let myself think about it. I was still stuck in that strange in-between where you're grieving a man you're not sure you ever really knew. "Well," she continued, brushing imaginary lint from her cuff, "I'll be direct since you always valued honesty." She smiled then, but it wasn't a smile, it was a warning. "David left everything to me and Kendra." Silence. She waited, watching me like a hawk measuring distance before a dive. "Excuse me," I said finally. She tilted her head. "His estate. The house, the savings, the boat, his business shares, all of it." The hallway felt like it had shrunk 3 sizes. "He left nothing to me?" I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. "I believe there's an old upright piano in the garage he mentioned, sentimentally," she replied with a smirk. And just like that, the floor beneath me cracked. Not because I wanted his money, but because I mattered. I should have mattered. The last memory I had of my father and me together was us fixing the latch on that music box he helped me build when I was 13. It had been off-key for years. I'd brought it up when I visited him once in Charleston, and he spent 2 hours at the kitchen table with a tiny screwdriver and a tune in his throat. He still whistled the melody sometimes when he called. Until he didn't. Bernice's voice pierced the memory. "It was a simple will. No complications. Kendra will handle the trust transfer. But I thought it was best to tell you before the lawyer's letter arrived. Better coming from family." Family. That word hit harder than anything else. She touched my arm again, her voice mockingly kind. "Don't be upset, dear, it's just business. You've built a little life for yourself, haven't you? Teaching music in Atlanta, was it?" My throat burned. "Why are you telling me this here?" I asked quietly, glancing toward the double doors where the muffled buzz of conversation echoed through the reception hall. "Oh, Allison." Her tone was syrupy now. "You always did think the world was fairer than it is." I stared at her. At the painted lips, the glittering earrings, the eyes that gave nothing away. "Was this your idea?" I asked. "Cutting me out." She blinked, surprised or pretending to be. "David was a man of clear decisions. You know how he felt about absentee family." I recoiled. "I wasn't absent. I lived 6 hours away. He stopped calling me." "People drift," she said with a shrug. "It's no one's fault." But it was someone's fault, and I had a sickening suspicion whose. She stepped past me then, her perfume wafting behind her like ghostly laughter. "You should get a plate before the food's gone. People will start leaving soon." I didn't follow. Instead, I stood alone in that dim hallway, hands trembling, teeth clenched. My reflection in the gilded mirror beside me looked pale and brittle, like someone halfway erased. When I finally returned to the main room, everything felt louder, sharper. People smiled, sipped wine, offered platitudes, but I couldn't hear them, because every word Bernice said echoed louder in my head. "He left you nothing." The chandelier above me buzzed faintly, casting its polished light over the crowd like nothing had happened. I smiled at no one, slipped out through the side door, and cried in the parking lot, where no one could see me. That night, I curled up in the bed I used to sleep in as a teenager, knees tucked under my chin like I was trying to fold into a version of myself I barely remembered. The house smelled the same, lavender and lemon floor polish, with a trace of whatever laundry detergent Bernice had always insisted was good enough for company. My old room had barely changed. Same buttercream walls, same white dresser with the wobbly middle drawer. On the bookshelf, a few dusty awards from high school still stood like forgotten soldiers. And on the nightstand, a picture of me and Dad from the summer we built the music box. He was laughing in that photo, his arm slung over my shoulder, sawdust in his hair. I was maybe 13. We had matching smudges on our noses from glue or dirt or both. That was the summer he started calling me his little maestro. I stared at the picture for a long time, the kind of stare that burns. I didn't bring a suitcase. Just my purse and the small black coat I hadn't even zipped all the way before leaving the reception. I'd slipped out while no one was looking, heart pounding like I was stealing something. Only it wasn't theft, it was escape. The silence in that room was thick and familiar, like grief had unpacked before I did. I lay there listening to the ticking of the hallway clock, Dad's old one from his office. Bernice must have moved it. The sound was steady, patient. A reminder of time passing, indifferent. I didn't cry right away. I just went still. That kind of still where your body feels heavy with knowing, but your brain hasn't caught up. My fingers grazed the edge of the photo frame again and again, as if touching it might bring some forgotten memory to the surface. But nothing came. Just the truth I didn't want to name. He left me nothing. Not even a note. Not a letter, not a recording. Not a single word to say goodbye. Just silence wrapped in legal ink and Burness's smug grin. Had I really meant that little to him? Had he really erased me so neatly? And yet there were things that didn't make sense. He'd sent me a birthday card last year. Late, as usual. But it had a joke about piano teachers and included a $20 bill folded inside. "Buy something out of tune," he wrote. I kept that card. It was somewhere in my apartment in Atlanta, probably tucked into a drawer with old receipts and broken pens. I used to think his love was just quiet. Maybe that's how he was. Not the type to call every week or show up for holidays, but still there. Still mine. Now I wondered if that was a lie I'd clung to so I didn't feel abandoned. I rolled onto my back, staring up at the cracked ceiling paint. The moonlight cut through the blinds in slats, laying bars across my chest like a cage. Was Burness right? Had I drifted? Like she said. I'd missed Christmas twice. Skipped a couple of birthdays, always said work was busy. And it was teaching music doesn't come with luxury or time off. But was that really why we drifted? Or had I been slowly written out of the story the moment he remarried? I remembered the first Christmas with Burness. I was 12. She gave me a lavender bath set and told me not to touch the baby grand in the sitting room unless I'd washed my hands thoroughly. I remember that word, thoroughly, because it felt like it had teeth. The year after, Dad gave me a new metronome, but when I asked him to help me calibrate it, he said he was tired and never brought it up again. Some part of me always assumed he just didn't know how to show love the way I needed. Now I wondered if he'd just stopped trying. The tears came slowly. Not loud, not messy, just a slow leak from somewhere deep. I clutched the pillow to my chest and let it happen, the way you let rain hit the window on a sleepless night. You don't ask it to stop. You just listen. That photo on the nightstand stared at me like it didn't know what side to take. Eventually, I sat up and pulled open the bottom drawer of my dresser. Inside, I found what I didn't know I was looking for, a box of old photos. Ones Burness hadn't tossed, probably because she didn't know they were there. There was one of me and Mom before she passed. I was 5. She was wearing her favorite red scarf, the one she'd always said made her feel like someone important. Her arms were around me. She looked real. I held that photo to my chest. That night I slept with my mother's memory in one hand and my father's silence in the other, and I made a decision. I didn't know how yet, but I would find out the truth, because something about the will didn't feel right. And whatever secrets Burness was so smug about, I had a feeling she wasn't the only one who knew them. The next morning I woke to gray light pressing through the blinds and a knot in my stomach that hadn't untangled overnight. I'd barely slept, but my mind had been racing. Not just with grief, but with questions. Burness's smug reveal, my father's silence, Kendra's urgent words at the funeral. You think you know what's going on, but you don't. What did she mean by that? I kept hearing her voice in that strained whisper, like it wasn't just anger behind it. It was something else. Panic, maybe, or guilt. So I got dressed, tied my hair back into a low knot, and left the house without a word. Kendra wasn't answering my texts, but I remembered she'd taken a part-time assistantship in the fine arts department at Middleton College. My father used to brag about it back when we were on speaking terms. Said she was finally doing something serious with her art. The irony wasn't lost on me. When I applied to a conservatory after high school, he told me music was a lovely hobby, but I needed a backup plan. I didn't cry when I got my rejection letter, but I did when he said maybe it was for the best. It was a short drive to Middleton, but it felt longer. Every red light gave me more time to talk myself out of it, but I didn't turn around. I parked near the art building, an old red brick cube with ivy strangling its corners, and followed signs to the ceramics studio. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of clay and varnish. A few students were working quietly under harsh white lights. One of them pointed me toward the back room where the kilns roared like distant thunder. And there she was, Kendra, my father's stepdaughter, my stepsister. She wore a paint-stained smock over jeans, her hair twisted into a messy bun. She looked different than she had at the funeral, smaller somehow, less composed. There were smudges under her eyes, and her hands were trembling slightly as she pulled a tray from the kiln. She didn't see me right away, But when she did, she froze. "What are you doing here?" she asked, setting the tray down with more force than necessary. "I came to ask what you meant yesterday," I said. "Outside the chapel, when you said I didn't know what was going on." She turned her back to me, pulling off her gloves. "I was emotional. It was a funeral, Allison." "No, you were angry. You said I wasn't around, that I didn't see what really happened. What did you mean by that?" She faced me then, slowly, her mouth pressed into a hard line. "You really want to do this here?" "Why not?" I replied. "You seemed desperate to talk yesterday." Something flickered in her eyes, a crack in the armor. "You don't get it," she snapped. "You were always gone. College, Atlanta. You sent birthday cards, sure, but you weren't there." I crossed my arms. "He stopped inviting me, Kendra." "Maybe because you made him feel like he was never enough," she shot back. "You always came in acting like your life was better, like we were the sad little side family." My breath caught. That wasn't how I remembered it, not even close. She sighed, her voice softening. "He was sick, Allison, for longer than you know." That stopped me. "Sick how?" She hesitated. "He was having dizzy spells. Chest pain. He didn't tell anyone, not even Bernice, not at first. I only knew because I was helping him with his medications while Mom was in New York with that real estate conference. He made me promise not to say anything." I stepped closer. "So, he knew something was wrong but didn't tell me." "You were busy," she said, and the bitterness returned. "Too busy to come home. Too busy to see that he was falling apart." I wanted to scream. I wanted to explain how many weekends I'd spent staring at my phone, wondering if it was me, if I'd done something wrong. "Do you think I didn't want to be there?" I said, my voice shaking. "Do you think it didn't kill me when I stopped getting calls?" Her jaw clenched. She looked away. "He changed the will last year," she said quietly. "Right after his health got worse." That stopped me cold. "What?" She looked at me again, eyes glassy. "He called a notary to the house. Said it was time to make things official." I asked him what he meant. He told me, "Bernice will handle things now. Kendra knows the drill." I stared at her. "And you didn't think that was odd?" She wiped her hands on her smock. "I thought maybe he just didn't trust you anymore. I mean, you hadn't been around." I laughed bitterly. "So that justifies cutting me out completely." "I didn't say that," she snapped. "But maybe if you'd been there more." I stepped back. "Wow," I said, cold rising in my chest. "You really believe that, don't you?" She didn't answer, just turned back to the kiln like I was a ghost she couldn't handle anymore. The ceramic tray on the table cracked softly as it cooled. So did something between us. I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, I paused. "You said I didn't see what really happened. Well, I'm looking now." I didn't wait for her response. I walked out into the gray light, the cold air slicing across my face like a wake-up slap. She was hiding something, maybe a lot, but so was someone else. And if I had to peel back every lie, I would, because this wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was about the truth, and I wasn't going to stop until I found it. The sky had cleared by the time I reached the cemetery. That Charleston humidity had finally lifted, replaced by a chill that made the trees creak as if they too were grieving. I parked at the far end of the graveyard and walked slowly, the kind of slow that has nothing to do with pace and everything to do with what your heart can bear. I hadn't planned to come here, but after that confrontation with Kendra, after everything she said and didn't say, I felt like there was no one left I could talk to. Not really. No one who might tell the truth without trying to twist it. Except him. I found the grave easily. The fresh dirt was still darker than the rest, the flowers already starting to wilt from too much sun and not enough care. David Allen Taylor, 1958-2025. There was no quote etched in the stone, just his name, dates, and that finality. I stood there for a while, arms wrapped around myself, unsure what to say. The last time I visited a cemetery was when Mom died. I was 10. I'd clung to Dad's coat the whole time, certain the wind would blow me away if I let go. Now I was 32. No coat to cling to. No one's hand in mine. Eventually, I sat on the edge of the low stone wall that circled the family plots and pulled the small wooden box from my bag. The music box. The one we built together when I was a teenager, back when he still called me ally and came to my school concerts. It was worn now. The varnish had faded and there was a tiny crack along the hinge. But when I opened it, the melody still played, off-key, but still there, like us. I placed it gently at the base of the headstone and let the tune drift through the air. It wasn't for show. No one else was around. It was just for him and me. "You left me nothing," I said quietly. "Not even an answer." My voice didn't break, but something in my chest did. "I don't know if you were protecting me or punishing me or just forgetting me." I reached out, touching the cool stone. But I need you to know, whatever secrets you thought would stay buried with you, I'm going to dig them up. Not for the money, not even for the will, but because I deserve to know the truth about my own life. The wind picked up slightly, rattling the branches above. I pulled my jacket tighter, eyes still locked on the stone. I know Bernice manipulated you. I know she had her way of twisting things, and maybe you let her. Maybe that was easier than dealing with me. It hurt to say that, but honesty was all I had left. I wiped my hands on my jeans, suddenly aware of how cold the ground was beneath me. Still, I stayed seated, needing to say the words that had haunted me since the funeral. I waited for you to call me. I waited for you to explain why you stopped showing up, why I started feeling like a visitor in my own family. My voice dropped to a whisper. I never stopped hoping you'd come back. I placed my hand over the music box one last time, letting the last notes fade into the quiet. I don't know if Kendra's telling the truth, I said, but I know she's not telling everything. The wind carried the scent of pine and something older, earthy, like secrets under soil. I'm going to find out what really happened, I promised. Even if it hurts, even if it makes me hate you, because I think there's something you wanted me to find, and I won't stop until I do. I stood up, brushing off my jeans. As I turned to leave, I whispered, you should have left me the music box and the will. I would have understood. That would have been enough. But he didn't. So now I had to make my own kind of closure. I walked away slowly, the sun dipping low behind the trees, casting long shadows across the graves. I didn't look back, because this time I wasn't going to grieve in silence. This time I was going to fight. And the first step, figuring out if Kendra was a pawn in all of this or part of the game. The next morning, my phone rang just after 9. I was still in my pajamas, staring at the same cup of cold coffee I'd poured an hour ago. My dreams had been strange, broken into jagged pieces, my father building a house with no doors, Kendra painting over every window in black. I answered on the second ring. Allison. Kendra's voice was tentative, barely above a whisper. I didn't speak right away. My first instinct was to hang up. My second was to brace for another attack. But then she said, I'm sorry for how I acted, for what I said. My fingers gripped the phone tighter. Why now? A pause, then, because I was scared. And because I'm tired of lying to myself. There was no malice in her tone this time, just a sort of fragile exhaustion. She asked if we could meet, somewhere neutral. Downtown, she said. The cafe on King Street, the one with the velvet chairs. I agreed, against better judgment. But my gut said this time would be different. The cafe was warm inside, the amber lighting catching in the gold trim along the walls. The barista behind the counter looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine, all tattoos and kindness. I ordered a chai latte I wouldn't taste. Kendra was already there, sitting in a corner booth, hands wrapped tightly around her mug like it was the only solid thing in her life. Her eyes met mine. They were red-rimmed, not from makeup, just weariness. You came, she said, as if surprised. I slid into the seat across from her. You said you were done lying, let's start there. She gave a short, humorless laugh. I deserve that. We sat in silence for a moment. I watched a couple argue softly near the pastry case. The clink of spoons and muted jazz gave the place an oddly surreal calm, like we were in a pocket of time that couldn't hurt us. Then Kendra spoke. My mom Bernice, she changed everything before Dad even got sick. I frowned. The will, she nodded. Quietly. She convinced him to put all assets in her name and then later into a living trust. I didn't know at first, but I overheard them one night. They thought you wouldn't contest it, that you just disappear. I swallowed hard. Why would I disappear? Because you always walked away. You didn't fight, not when she started redecorating, not when Dad stopped calling. You left, and Mom, she counted on that. I stared at her. So she stole everything, and you let her. No, Kendra said quickly. I didn't know until months later. And when I found out, she told me I could either be part of the family or be cut out like you. The pain in her voice was sharp. I should have told you at the funeral, but I panicked. I thought maybe you'd already hired a lawyer or would blow everything up publicly. I just wanted to talk, explain, but you wouldn't listen. You cornered me next to a gravestone, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Kendra winced. I know. I let out a breath. The mug in my hands had gone cold again. Why are you telling me this now? Because it's wrong, she whispered. Because Dad. He didn't know how to stand up to her, but I think he regretted it. And because, her voice caught. You deserve to know the truth. I studied her. Kendra had always been difficult to read, so much like her mother on the surface, but something softer underneath. As kids, we'd shared bunk beds on road trips, fought over cereal boxes, and once cried together the night my childhood dog died. Then she grew older, sharper, quieter. Like the house we lived in taught her to guard herself before anyone else could. Why now? I asked again, this time quieter. Because I'm tired of pretending loyalty to someone who only sees me as leverage, she said. And because I kept thinking about that music box. My eyes narrowed. What about it? I saw you bring it to the grave. He showed it to me once, told me you were the only one who could fix it right. A pause. I think he loved you more than you knew, she added. But he was weak. I didn't know how to respond to that. So instead I asked, can we prove it, that she'd changed the will? Kendra looked up. There was steel in her eyes now. I think so, but we'd need help. A flicker of something passed between us. Not trust, not yet, but a shared intention. We were no longer stepsisters caught in old wounds. We were co-conspirators. 3 days later, Kendra and I sat shoulder to shoulder in a room that smelled like mothballs and coffee grounds. The office belonged to Mr. Reuben Clay, a retired notary who had handled legal paperwork in Charleston for over 30 years. He had a slight hunch in his back and wore oversized glasses that made his pale blue eyes look owl-like. The office was cluttered. Stacks of yellowing documents, faded manila folders, and brass lamps that gave the place a soft amber glow. It felt like stepping into the past, the kind of place secrets go to gather dust. Kendra had found his name in a notebook from Dad's home office, wedged between receipts and old check stubs. There was one entry, dated almost a year ago, that read, Reuben Clay Update Trust WBB, of course, being Burness. I'm surprised to see you two together, Mr. Clay said, squinting at us over the rim of his chipped coffee mug. Didn't think there was much love left in the Taylor household. Depends on the branch of the tree, I muttered. Kendra nudged me lightly under the table. We're looking for clarity, she said with a diplomatic smile. There was a will revision last year. My stepfather, David Taylor, had you notarize it, we think. He leaned back, eyebrows twitching. I notarized a lot of documents, but the Taylors, yeah, I remember that appointment. I leaned forward. Can you tell us what you remember? He glanced between us. Not much I'm legally allowed to share, but let's just say I had reservations. Kendra's eyes met mine. About what? Well, Mr. Taylor looked. He searched for the word. Uneasy. He kept glancing at Mrs. Taylor like he was waiting for permission. And there were inconsistencies in how the documents were phrased. I remember because Burness insisted I not read too closely. I felt my pulse tick upward. Do you still have copies? He shook his head. Not after retirement, but I kept notes just in case. From the bottom drawer of a rusted file cabinet, he pulled out a thin folder marked in red pen, Taylor Estate. Inside were a few loose pages, mostly scribbled shorthand, but one note stood out. Power of attorney updated. Witnessed signature hesitant. Will redraft it under strong verbal direction from BT, not client. I pointed to it. You wrote this. He nodded slowly. It didn't feel right, but it was legal enough, at least on paper. I told Mr. Taylor he had the right to ask for a private revision. He just looked tired and said, it's easier this way. Easier for who? Kendra looked ill. She pressured him, she whispered. I knew it. He closed the file with a soft sigh. Look, I'm not saying she forged anything, but it smelled off. If you want to challenge it, you'll need a lawyer and maybe a forensic examiner. A what? I asked. Handwriting analysis, signature comparisons. If the documents were altered or coerced, there's a way to prove it. It felt like a thread, fragile but real, something to follow. We thanked Mr. Clay and walked back out into the crisp air. For the first time since the funeral, I felt a strange warmth in my chest. It wasn't hope exactly, but it was movement, a beginning. In the car, I turned to Kendra. You didn't have to come today. She shrugged, folding her arms across her chest. I did. I let her get away with too much. I let her make me complicit, and I'm done. I nodded. You think we'll find more? She looked out the window. If Burness really manipulated him into changing everything, there'll be a paper trail. She's smart, but not careful. Silence settled for a moment. Then Kendra added, you know, Dad kept a locked box in the attic, said it was for family records. I always thought it was just birth certificates and old insurance policies, but now I turned the ignition. Then that's our next stop. As the car pulled away, a strange sensation washed over me, like I was finally doing something my father had wanted all along. He hadn't left me the music box in the will, but maybe he left me something better, a trail, and I was finally ready to follow it. Thursday started like any other teaching day. My classroom smelled faintly of violin resin and peppermint tea, and the sound of beginner piano scales filled the air like clumsy hope. I had just finished a private lesson with one of my middle school students, a shy girl named Mabel who could barely look me in the eye but played Chopin with the kind of aching purity that made you stop breathing, when the front desk secretary knocked on the door. "Allison," she said softly, glancing around as if the walls might be listening. "You've received a package. It was hand-delivered." I blinked. "A package?" She nodded and handed me a large manila envelope with no return address. Just my full name, written in stiff black ink. The moment I touched it, I knew it was heavy, dense with something sharp. Back in my office, I shut the door and tore it open with shaking fingers. Inside, official legal papers. Bernice Taylor v. Allison Taylor allegations, harassment, defamation, attempted estate interference. My throat went dry. My stepmother had filed a court injunction against me. There were pages of legal language I barely understood, but the bolded lines were enough. I was being accused of trying to manipulate and extort financial control over the late David Taylor's assets and stalking family members in an effort to obtain sensitive information under false pretenses. It was laughable, but not funny. I reread the phrase, pattern of harassment targeting widow and heir, like I'd never even existed in that house, like I was a footnote in my father's legacy, an outsider playing intruder. By the time the final bell rang, my students had already left and I was still frozen in my chair, the papers spread across my desk like a battlefield. My hands were shaking, not with rage, with fear, because this wasn't just a family squabble anymore. This was legal war. A knock broke through the panic. It was my department head, Angela. She saw my face and stepped inside without waiting. "Allison," she said carefully, "is everything okay?" I tried to speak. Nothing came out. I handed her the papers. Her brows furrowed as she flipped through them. She was quiet for a long moment before gently setting them down. "She's trying to intimidate you." "I don't know what to do," I whispered. "What if this ruins my job, my reputation?" Angela put a hand on my shoulder. "Then you fight smart, and you don't fight alone." That night, after crying in the faculty restroom and driving home in complete silence, I called Kendra. Her voice was sharp with alarm when I told her. "She filed already? That fast?" "She's trying to corner me before we dig deeper," I said. "She's scared." "She should be," Kendra replied bitterly. "She knows what's in that safe if we can find it." "There's no if," I said. "We're opening that attic box tomorrow." But that night I lay awake replaying the words, pattern of harassment, attempted estate interference. She was painting me as a threat, a bitter daughter chasing ghosts. And maybe, on the surface, that's what it looked like. But deep down, I wasn't chasing ghosts. I was chasing the truth. And Bernice had just confirmed I was getting close. The attic door creaked like it was warning us not to look. Kendra stood at the base of the pull-down ladder, arms folded tightly across her chest, while I climbed first. It smelled exactly how you'd expect. Dry insulation, mothballs, and old air that hadn't been stirred in years. The last time I'd been in this attic, I was a teenager sneaking up here to find my Christmas presents early. That year, I found a wooden jewelry box addressed to Bernice, not me, and I never snooped again. I tugged the light cord and let the yellow bulb flicker to life. "Do you remember where it was?" I called down. Kendra climbed up behind me, brushing dust off her jacket. "Back corner, near the water heater." We crawled through a forest of boxes, old linens, books Dad never finished, bins labeled Kendra College and Christmas Dacre. And there it was, a gray lockbox about the size of a microwave, dented on one side with a small rusting latch. No label, no markings. Kendra crouched beside it and tried the latch, locked, of course. But she didn't hesitate. She pulled out a small paperclip from her pocket, bent into a rough pick. "Art school was more useful than you thought," she muttered with a crooked grin. 2 minutes later, the latch popped open with a soft click. The air changed, just slightly, like the attic itself was holding its breath. We opened the lid together. Inside was a stack of files, neat, bound with elastic bands and labeled in Dad's handwriting. "Taylor Trust Original Draft Property Transfer 2022, Redraft, Bernice Durable Power of Attorney Notes, Allison Contact." Kendra reached for that last one immediately. "He had notes," she murmured. I picked up the legal draft labeled Redraft. The first thing I noticed was the signature line, Dad's name scrawled shakily beneath a paragraph about transferring full control of his estate into a joint trust with Bernice and Kendra. but something was off. His signature looks different, I said slowly. Look, this one's neat. That one's uneven. Kendra leaned in. He used to sign everything with a loop on the D. This one doesn't have it. We rifled through the stack, hearts pounding in time. The more we read, the worse it got. Bernice had gradually taken over nearly everything. Insurance, power of attorney, healthcare directives. It was a slow legal suffocation. But then hidden at the bottom was a small, folded note in Dad's handwriting. I recognized it instantly. The sharp, precise way he wrote when he was focused. The kind of penmanship he used in birthday cards. If anything happens, check with Clay. I told her no, but I don't think it mattered. My breath caught. Kendra, he didn't agree to this. She stared at the note, silent, pale. He knew, she whispered. He knew she was going behind his back. We didn't speak for a long time. The wind rattled against the attic vents like fingers tapping on truth. He was going to fix it, I said finally, but he ran out of time. We sat there, surrounded by dust and silence and legal paper that pulsed with betrayal. And for the first time, it was clear. Dad hadn't forgotten me. He'd tried. She just made sure I never knew. If you had asked me a week ago whether Kendra and I would ever be on the same side of anything, I would have laughed. But now, we were co-pilots on a ship built from lies, sailing toward something neither of us fully understood. And as much as I wanted to believe in this fragile alliance, something in me had started to twitch. An instinct. A shift. The kind that tells you someone is standing behind you, even when you're alone. We spent the next 2 days collecting evidence. Photocopies. Scans. Kendra pulled bank statements from her mother's office while Bernice was at a bridge club meeting. I drove to a county clerk's office and requested transaction records tied to Dad's old properties. Each time I found a sale with his name and Bernice's, but no mention of me. It felt like another layer of him peeling away. We met at night in my childhood room, spreading documents across the quilt like kids building a haunted puzzle. We're getting close, I said one evening, circling a suspicious transfer on a printout. This check cleared 2 days after he was admitted to the hospital. He wasn't even coherent. Kendra nodded, but her eyes flicked away. That was the first time I noticed it, how she wouldn't hold my gaze anymore. At first, I brushed it off. We were both tired, shaken. Maybe she was scared this would all fall apart. But then it started happening more. She'd dodge questions, deflect when I asked about specific dates. Like the week Dad updated the trust and she claimed to have been in Savannah with friends. But a florist invoice I'd found in the attic said otherwise. She'd signed for a delivery at the house that same week. When I asked, she blinked and said, maybe the date's wrong. And just like that, my stomach twisted. If she'd lied about that, what else? Still, I tried to keep it together. We needed each other. And I wanted to believe she was being honest. But late one night while she was in the shower, I passed her phone on the dresser and saw a message light up. Mom, let me handle this. You're too deep already. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The words lit up like a fuse in my chest. Too deep. So this was still a game. A move in a long-played war between survival and guilt. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake, eyes on the ceiling fan, wondering which version of Kendra I was dealing with. The one who cried in the cafe or the one who'd silently enabled a theft too elegant to scream. By morning, I had made up my mind. We needed to talk. For real. So after breakfast, quiet and tense, neither of us saying much, I asked her directly. Kendra, why did you lie about being gone the week Dad changed the trust? She froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. I didn't, she said too quickly. You did. There was a delivery to the house. You signed for it. I found the invoice. Silence stretched like taut string. Finally, she set her spoon down. It doesn't matter. It does matter, I said, more sharply than I meant to. Because if you're lying about that, what else are you lying about? Her eyes flashed. I'm on your side, Allison. I'm the only reason you even found that attic box. I stood, heat rising. I didn't come this far to be manipulated again. If you're playing both sides, if you're still loyal to her, then say it now. She didn't speak. Instead, her eyes filled suddenly, but not with remorse, with something colder. Do you know what it's like, she said softly, to be raised by someone like Bernice? You think I had a choice, that I could just wake up and pick morality? I didn't know what to say to that. Because no, I didn't know, but that didn't change the facts. You either want justice, I said carefully, or you want to protect your mother. You can't do both. Kendra wiped a tear roughly with the back of her hand and whispered, maybe I don't know what I want. And with that, she turned and walked out of the room. I stared at the closed door for a long time. The alliance was cracking, and I didn't know if it would survive the truth. Courtrooms always look colder in real life than they do in movies. The wood doesn't gleam as much, and the air carries this clinical weight, like everything personal has been bleached out of it. I sat behind the plaintiff's table, palms slick against the folder of evidence we'd pieced together over the last 2 weeks. Photos, dates, handwriting samples, that attic note from Dad. I had them all lined up like soldiers, but I still wasn't sure if any of them would matter. Bernice sat across the room in a pearl gray suit that screamed careful calculation. Her hair was perfect, her lipstick unbothered. If you hadn't known the truth, you'd think she was the grieving widow fending off a jealous stepdaughter. She hadn't looked at me once. Next to her, her attorney, a man with an expensive watch and the emotional range of a granite countertop, sorted through glossy packets of polished lies. And Kendra was nowhere to be seen. She'd disappeared the night before. No texts, no calls, just silence. I had tried not to let that unravel me, had tried not to feel like I was being left behind again. But sitting there, watching Bernice smooth down the hem of her skirt like she was preparing for a photo op, the doubt clawed back in. Had I really been foolish enough to believe Kendra had changed? The judge entered. Proceedings began. Most of it blurred together, statements, objections, Bernice's lawyer painting me as estranged, emotional, unreasonably entitled. I stayed quiet until it was my turn. I stood at the witness stand and told them everything. About the will, the attic, the forged signatures, the timing of the trust redrafts overlapping with Dad's hospitalization. I recited dates like incantations and prayed the truth would cut through. And then the courtroom doors opened. Every head turned. Kendra. She walked in slowly as if dragging every ounce of courage behind her. In her hands, the file. The one we'd left locked in the glove compartment the night she vanished. Bernice's jaw tightened. Kendra didn't look at her, didn't look at me. She went straight to the bailiff and whispered something, then walked up to the front and requested to testify. Bernice's lawyer protested, but the judge allowed it. And Kendra took the stand. Her voice was shaky, but she didn't waver. My mother pressured David Taylor into rewriting his will, she began, fingers tightening around the microphone. He didn't want to, he told me so, but she convinced him it was safer for the family. That Allison didn't need to know. Bernice's voice rang out from her seat. Kendra, don't do this. The judge slammed the gavel once. Miss Taylor, he said sternly, continue. And she did. She told them about the midnight meetings, the power of attorney forms slipped under Dad's nose while he was medicated. She admitted she'd lied to me, that she'd tried to protect Bernice out of fear and habit and guilt. But I can't do that anymore, she said, voice cracking. Because he loved Allison. He didn't always show it, but he did. And he tried to fix things. She deserves to know that. There was a moment of silence so loud it felt like a thunderclap. Bernice stood suddenly. You ungrateful little, the judge raised his gavel. That's enough, Mrs. Taylor. And just like that, the tide turned. The case wouldn't be finalized for weeks, maybe longer. Legal wheels turned slow. But outside the courthouse that day, the air felt different. Free. Kendra stood beside me, her hands shaking as she lit a cigarette she wouldn't even smoke. You okay? I asked. She gave a humorless laugh, not even a little. You did the right thing. She looked at me. For the first time, there was nothing between us, no armor, no walls. She hated me when I walked off that stand, she whispered. But you didn't. No, I said. I didn't. We stood there for a while in silence, letting the wind tangle our hair and the weight of everything we'd been through settle around us. Finally, Kendra turned to me. He did love you, you know, she said. He just didn't know how to show it once Mom got involved. I'm still not sure that's enough, I admitted. She nodded. Maybe not, but now you know. And somehow that made all the difference. I wasn't erased. I wasn't forgotten. I was seen, and I wasn't alone anymore.